Hi everyone, my name is Michael Sansa. I'm the chairman of the ICMA Future Leaders, and welcome to today's event, which is our first virtual and global event. We usually kick off our events with a welcome reception, but I'll do my best today to make it equally entertaining nevertheless with our great panel discussion that we have lined up for you. Before we kick off with the panel, just want to briefly go over ICMA and Future Leaders for those who are attending for the first time today. ICMA is an organization that brings together all of the members within our industry, and they focus on 4 key areas, which are the primary markets, the secondary markets, repo and collateral, and then the green, social, and sustainable bond markets. It has around over 600 members in over 62 different countries, and it has been playing a pivotal role within debt capital markets for over 50 years now, throughout its various committees, creating market standards. It's also known for its vast amount of educational courses that it offers and the numerous networking events that it organizes, just like this one. In May 2015, the ICMA board then decided to create the Future Leader Committee, which consists of 20 committee members representing member firms from ICMA across Europe. And the objective of the Future Leaders is basically to create the connection with the next generation of market professionals, because you basically have the young professional generation on the one hand, and ICMA as an association on the other. And it's not always clear for those young professionals how to access those services or that information. And that's basically where the Future Leaders try to fill the gap. We do that by focusing on 3 key areas, which are education, career progression, and networking. And over the past years, this initiative has gained tremendous momentum, and we've been able to launch a couple of very successful initiatives. And I'm just going to go over a couple of them in case some of you want to get to know a little bit more about them. So a couple of them are, for example, the showcase page that we have on the dedicated ICMA LinkedIn page, which is followed by more or less 6,000 people. So there's definitely a lot of discussion going on. We share articles, and we also market our events there. We also have a mentoring platform, which is it's an online mentoring platform where mentors and mentees can match with each other. And I think this one is very valuable because you can basically match with mentors across member firms. I think we have about 203 mentors signed up at the moment, and over 600 mentees that have signed up and are currently undergoing mentoring. We also have a Future Leader newsletter where we discuss various topics from regulatory trending things, but also cryptocurrencies, Brexit, some of the more trending topics. I think we've had over 6 different editions and they've been read by over 5,000 people. So definitely have a look at the page we will publish after this event, where you can find all the information with regards to the Future Leaders to find out more how to sign up for this. One of the last things I want to highlight are the ICMA podcasts. It's a medium that's very appealing to our generation. It's been used in various other industries as well. So I'm happy to see that ICMA has embraced this as well, because I think it's a valuable tool to share the knowledge that ICMA as an association holds, to share it across its members. I do want to highlight that we do not only do online events. Prior to COVID, we had about 8 to 10 annual Future Leader events across Europe in the various financial hubs on various topics and in different formats. So usually like tonight in a panel discussion, but also structured networking, for example. But for that, again, I do encourage you to look at the page that will be shared after the event, where basically you can find out more how to follow us for these events that will definitely continue after today. We also gladly welcome any feedback you might have to sort of get involved with the initiative or to launch new initiatives that you might have. So definitely reach out if you think you want to get involved with that. But I think that's it for me. I think I spoke enough. Now it's time to get straight to the action. I will pass on the word to Tim Skeet, who he himself has endured many more crises throughout his career and has been actively involved with ICMA throughout his career as well. Thank you very much. And Tim, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. As Michael said, I've seen plenty of crises, plenty of challenges over a career which has now spanned almost 4 decades. I've just celebrated a work anniversary, and I'm delighted to say I'm still here and I'm still planning to be here and hopefully hosting these sessions for a few more years to come. Although I must admit, sitting at home isn't quite what I had in mind when a few months ago when I was looking at what my next career move might be. All those of you who know me, obviously I've been in the debt capital markets for all my life, pretty much all my working life, I should say. Background in financial institutions, DCM, for those who care. And I've done that for quite a while, specializing in continental Europe. So Scandinavia, France, Germany was my patch. And I did modern languages as a student, so I'm unusual in that respect. I'm a literary guy who ended up in banking, but in fact I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed my career and I'm still having fun, which I think is the most important point, even though today the circumstances are a bit odd. So today I hope we're going to get lots of questions from all of you because we're doing this for your benefit. We've got a fantastic panel of four people here today who are experts in mentoring and coaching and giving advice and leadership really to people, to all of us, people across the globe. This is a very international group. We have Mads calling in from Copenhagen. We have Jill in the northwest of the UK and Ella and Cynthia. Well, Cynthia I think is in Buckinghamshire and Ella's like me in London, but we're very international. So I welcome my panelists. I'm going to start first with Cynthia. If you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Tim. I feel like I'm on blind date or something, but so I'm Cynthia Davis, and I'm the chief exec and founder of an organization called Bain Recruitment, and also the co-founder of a tech platform called diversifying.io. So I've been working in the recruitment sector now for just over 20 years, and I've recruited people from all kind of walks of life and across all different kind of sectors. And I suppose I started my business, my first business 5 years ago, really just out of sheer frustration of not seeing change happen fast enough when it comes to diverse talent. So the work that we do through both our organizations is to work with companies who are putting diversity at the heart of everything that they do. It's about creating equal access to opportunities for everyone, but really trying to level the playing field to make sure that talent from all walks of life is coming through into organizations. And I think for me, you know, one of the things that I'm very supportive of is nurturing, you know, future talent. I do mentoring through a fantastic organization called the Stephen Lawrence Trust, which mentors young adults in terms of their career options. And that's really got me thinking about some of the challenges that young people face when they're thinking of careers, but also just, you know, entry into certain sectors and some of the barriers that exist for people from different kind of walks of life. So really today I'm hoping to try and support or advise on some of the things that, you know, for anyone that's out there that's looking at either just their career, what else they need to be doing, especially within this current environment that we're in, to just be able to offer some advice on navigating your career.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Let's quickly hear from Mads. You're up there in Copenhagen right now, embracing hygge.
I am, and I have some candles next to me just to really manifest the spirit of hygge and bring as much as I can to this session. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Mads Leonhardt Thomsen. Great to be here with you today. My background is that I have worked with leadership and talent development for approximately the last 15 years. Primarily in different international organizations. I've worked across Europe and I've worked in Asia. My last corporate role was in financial services. I worked as head of talent development for the Scandinavian bank Nordea. Then for the last 2 years, I've been running my own company where I work with leadership development, organization development, and as a business coach. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is career transitions. And have worked with a lot of graduates in my time as well, both in oil and shipping and in banking as well. So I hope to bring a lot of that into the room today and share all my experiences on leadership and transitions and change, and look forward to be here with you all.
Thank you, Mads. Anna, and you had to cancel your wedding this year, is that right?
I did, yes. No, I'm a COVID bride. I'm sure there's,
yeah.
but we've all, had to sacrifice some bits and pieces in the pandemic. My name's Ella Robertson. I am the managing director of One Young World, the global forum for young leaders, which platforms like CNN call the Junior Davos. So every year we bring together young leaders from all sorts of companies and industries, change makers, politicians, journalists, to talk about the world's biggest problems and the role that young professionals can play in accelerating change. So one of our big messages is that you don't have to leave your job to have an impact. From within a big business or a very commercial environment, you can be incredibly impactful on the things that mean something to you. So whether that's climate change or gender equality, you don't have to go and work for a charity in order to make the change that you want to see. So I'm really looking forward to talking about purposeful careers, and especially in the pandemic, how we can use the kind of terrible things that are happening in the world, but how we can be inspired by them to make a difference.
Great, thank you very much. And last but not least, Jill.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome to everyone. So I'm Jill Watt. I am an executive coach, and I work for a company called the Preston Associates. Prior to deciding to become a coach, I spent 18 years working in various roles in the financial services, primarily in the finance and executive kind of corporate leadership roles. And it was my last role as the managing director of part of an insurance business where I realized actually what I really enjoyed about leadership was working with the team, but really getting the best out of my team and helping each member of that team be the best they can be. And having spent 18 years worrying about profit and loss and balance sheets, I decided I would leave that behind and just primarily focus on people and helping people. And so that's when I retrained to become an executive coach. Within the Preston Associates, and primarily I work with chief executives and CFOs and their executive teams, and really help them to understand how they maximize their performance, but also importantly, what's the performance they want. So make sure they're in the driving seat and it's their decisions. I'm passionate about helping people be the best they can possibly be. And that's a real pleasure, I suppose, to have that as your day job. And that's what I do every day, is help people be the best they can possibly be. I think for me, and we'll talk about it as we go through this, this webinar, and Ella's already mentioned the word purposeful. I think with careers and with people I work with, it's really about helping people think about what's their choice and make that purposeful choice. And I'll talk about it probably later as well. And making sure that it's the right decision, it's the right choice, and they're taking the time and space to think about what's the right choice for them.
Thank you very much, Jill. So we've got 4 really very experienced people here, so I'm hoping the questions will come thick and fast. In the meantime, I've got a list of questions in front of me, but of course, for many of you and some maybe of us, it's the first taste of a wide economic crisis. This is a social and economic crisis which is throwing challenges at all of us which we never dreamt we were going to have to face. And I think that applies. I may have seen many challenges in the past, economic, I've lost my job, I've had all sorts of things happen. This is new. I don't think any of us have had this. What advice should we give people navigating a career from where we all are, sitting at home, peering into bits of equipment as opposed to meeting people face to face? Mads, maybe you want to give us your Scandinavian view.
Oh, I think it's a broad question in how to navigate your career in this current situation. However, I think there's something to be aware of. We can go into that space where we think there's nothing we can do, and we can become paralyzed with the situation. And I think, for instance, when we talk about what can you do to still impact your career, there's lots of things you can do in terms of networking. There's a lot of people you can reach out to, even on a virtual platform. You can write people, you can connect with people, you can still deliver, even though you're working virtually. So you can still have your performance as a pillar. So I think it's about identifying what are the things that are in my control. What can I still influence, given all of what's around me that I might not necessarily be able to influence. I can't influence the restrictions, but there's still a lot of things that I can look into that will benefit me or you from a career point of view.
Jill, you can take this one for starters, but should we all be showing up physically at work to catch our boss's eye even during this time? How critical is physical presence in the office for career achievement and actually career advancement? That's a great question, actually, to get the ball rolling. What's your response to that?
So this is my opinion, and I suppose it's what I've observed through working with clients over the last 6 months. But I think for me, it's more about not physical interaction, but the value you create in the conversation or the interactions you have. And I think what I experience, leaders tend to be busier now than they were, and back-to-back Zoom. And I think it's about how do you capture your boss, your line managers, or the people you're trying to be visible with, and how do you create visibility? And I think that comes back to make sure it's a value interaction or a value communication. The way I would advise a coachee of mine in that space would be really think about the what. So what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve clarity? Are you trying to achieve visibility? Are you trying to achieve a conversation? But really think about, when you've had that interaction, what do you want your boss or your line manager to say, think and feel about you and about the interaction? And I would always advise, don't have the interaction until you've done that thinking. Because I think at the moment, what I'm seeing is leaders are overwhelmed as well. And they're trying to do their best to have that one-to-one connection with everyone, but with everything else and with COVID and with contingency planning, time gets short. So I think be visible, but be visible for the right reasons. And I would certainly think you can make more impact with the right communication remotely than have it face-to-face and not make the right impact, not make the right communication. So really think about the what. Okay.
Cynthia, do you want to add some words there?
I think, yeah, I was just to add on to what Jill said, and I think it's really important in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think sometimes just trying to be seen for the wrong reasons will sometimes almost have a negative impact, because you could become a little bit of a nuisance if everyone's really busy and trying to get through things. So it's really trying to understand what is it that you're trying to catch your boss's eye for. But also I think sometimes it's just being, putting yourself forward for certain extra responsibilities outside of your day-to-day routine. So if you know that your organization's going through a particular big project where everyone's stretched, offer to help, that can make you kind of stand out a little bit, offer to work and support somebody who might have a lot more work going on. And I think by doing and coming forward, by supporting that in itself, you're doing something that's positive, that will have a good impact on the organization, but also people will start seeing you as somebody that they could go to, somebody that they could trust for certain times where they need additional support. So it's being visible, but being visible in the right kind of way, without making yourself too much of a nuisance as well.
Yeah, you don't want to make a nuisance of yourself.
I thought Cynthia made a really good point about the right reasons as well. And I think it's really important to be authentic in the workplace and not to kind of be virtue signaling your hard work and being performative about it. If you're a hard worker on the whole, your boss is going to know you're a hard worker. I would say, first of all, if you don't, if you are worried about going to work for safety reasons, you follow the government advice to stay at home, and do not put your family at risk if they're shielding or something because of a sort of a perceived pressure to be in the office. If you're not worried about safety reasons, your boss, and if that your boss is the kind of person it's going to matter to that you're in the office, But otherwise, like, I think, you know, everyone understands that people can work well from home. And, you know, as Jill and Cynthia have said, particularly, there's loads of ways to make yourself stand out and appear hardworking or innovative and show your value, other than, you know, bums and seats at 7 a.m. or whatever it might be. So I just think don't worry about being performative and sort of virtue signaling your work ethic. I think let the performance speak for itself.
I mean, I think all of this is fair. I mean, it's a question everybody must be asking themselves: should I be back in the office or not? And I think the answer is clearly from our panel. Think about it carefully. I don't think anyone should be under pressure to go in if you're going to feel uncomfortable. You know, I think it's important that if you can work from home comfortably, that's a safe place to be. On the other hand, I am very aware that many of you, probably myself included, we prefer to be in the office. And in many ways, we can function more effectively in the office. As far as career is concerned, I think for the people that will work with me, would I prefer to see them? I think, again, selectively, Jill's absolutely spot on. It's incredibly challenging time. We have limited opportunities to interface with people. If people push their way into your consciousness without having a good reason to do it, then it maybe doesn't create the right impression, it creates the wrong impression, and you've actually done yourself a disservice. You've had the opposite impact you meant to have. That leads me on to another question we had. Well, what is the future of the office? I mean, are we all going to be permanently working from home? What's your view on that, Mads? Are we all stuck now? Is this it? The office is dead? We don't have to go into an office ever again?
I don't think the office is dead anyway. I remember in March, everyone was talking about that, the virtual space and how that would last. And in a few months, all my clients reported to me that they were having it with Zoom meetings and calendars filled with virtual meetings. And I'm seeing now from my clients that there are coming more workshops and training. I'm actually traveling to Norway tomorrow to be physically together with leadership teams to do training. It will come back. I think what we will see is a different mix. I think we'll see more flexibility. I can speak out of what I've seen here in Copenhagen and in Denmark and Scandinavia, that there will be more room for that flexibility about where you work, which I think can be a benefit in terms of the work-life balance. But there will be an office environment also in the future. I'm confident there will be space for that.
But I mean, guess we're going to have a better balance. Is that right, Cynthia? We're going to have a more balanced life. Is this the opportunity we've been waiting for?
Certainly, Tim. And I think, you know, to add to kind of Mad's point there, you know, I think the way of work has changed. And I think if I think back pre-COVID, when we were working with organizations and trying to get them to offer flexible working, for instance, there was this big push that people had to be physically in the office to be proactive. And I think what this period has allowed us to do was to see how actually working remotely you can still be proactive. And I think that's made a lot of organizations think differently about the way that they work, because if you're still able to have your team be productive in this kind of environment, that whole myth of people are only active if they're at their desk by 7 o'clock and leaving at 8 o'clock at night is almost been shattered, because people have still been proactive. But I think for me, what's been amazing about this period is it's allowed us to have more of a work-life balance, and be able to kind of have that flexibility that if you want to go into an office and have that interaction, then you can do. And I think what's really interesting is looking at the generations. So when I look at certain age groups, they prefer to have that socialness of coming into the office and that camaraderie that comes with having everybody around them, and that kind of team atmosphere and team banter. That's sometimes very important to a lot of people. But then there are others that are happy being productive, working on their own, are able to get their heads down and just carry on. So it's making sure that when we do return to some form of normality, that we're able to still have access to both, and be a little bit more flexible. So those that can approach it in a way that they want to have that physical interaction are still able to have that, but are still able to, if they do need to work from home, also have that flexibility as well.
Now, we've got 3 questions that come in. I'd like to take them as best we can, because I think these are valuable. The first one I'm going to ask, maybe Ella, you'd like to kick off here. How can best talent be cultivated during the pandemic? Best talent may not necessarily show as different skills emerge in different circumstances. There are those who thrive in an office environment and perhaps less so working from home. which presents its own challenges and may not be obvious to senior management. And it goes back a little bit. How do we sell ourselves in this difficult environment?
I think it's really tricky. I think it's tricky for both managers and for employees. You will want to be showing yourself as strong talent, and that might be really hard in your job if you're not able to kind of physically get that face time with people. I would say in order to showcase your talent as best possible, the phrase I was using in a meeting yesterday with work was like, bring some hustle. This is a time when all businesses are struggling in some way or other, like whether it's logistics challenges, financial challenges, it is a difficult time. And if you're able to come up with a really clever idea and sort of go off under an initiative and bring back some exciting news, all businesses are always going to appreciate that right now. And I really, really think that just going a little bit out of your bubble and showing your initiative and being proactive on a sort of a slightly edgier side of the business it's a great time to do that, because businesses need it. Same old isn't working. If you're a manager, I think you've got a real duty to be going out of your way to get some FaceTime, even if it is over Zoom, with your employees on a one-on-one basis, scheduling virtual coffees, virtual donuts, whatever it might be. If you've got Slack, use Slack.
And who pays for the donuts, Ella?
Some managers do send sort of care packages to employees, so you could go
there we are.
Do that.
If you're not getting your care package, make sure that someone's sending you one. Jill, I was going to jump to you actually, because what are you telling senior executives to be doing to kind of address this? Because it's a real concern for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to the coin, Tim. I think there's the side for the leaders. So certainly with leaders I'm working with, it's all about be curious and be far more curious than you were before, because there's a lot of the unconscious signs that we read as leaders in the office that we now don't see. So even just seeing how your team behave in the office, how they arrive in the morning, how they leave at night, gives us an insight into how that person is, how they're performing. So certainly with leaders I'm working with at the moment, it's about being curious. And the best way to be curious as a leader is stick to your open questions. So, really use those open questions to your teams of, how are you feeling? What's happening? What are you, probably the best one a leader can ask at the moment to their team is, what are you thinking about? So keep the curiosity and make sure that you're then listening to what you're hearing back. I think probably one of the things I've seen the most change in leadership through this time is we've switched to even more what I call command and tell style leadership. So there's lots of Zoom, but it's very tactical and it's very tell style leadership that's happening. Those who were great in the coaching space maybe are still staying there, but those who had more of a command and tell style leadership have certainly entrenched further. So to leaders, I say be curious, stay in a coaching style, ask the open questions. I think the other side of the coin, I would just say to individuals who are trying to be seen and demonstrate performance, the best thing you can continue to do is continue to build trust and demonstrate your trustworthiness in your performance and in your delivery. And to me, that's about demonstrate consistency and demonstrate delivery, and choose the right moments to share that delivery in the right space with the right people.
But you know what? I mean, it sounds to me from what you say, and Mads, maybe you can jump in, banking, you've been in banking. I would observe that banking isn't always very good at leadership. And frankly, it's not very good at empathizing with people. And the current crisis has made it much more challenging. Do we need to re-engineer our leadership? Mads, what's you going to say on that?
Well, I think I've seen a mixed bag of leadership qualities in the sector. I think I've seen great leaders with that attention to the staff and the attention to the individuals and where they are and checking in with them. I've been in organizations that really done a lot of work to transform how they show up as leaders. But I think that the command and tell leadership style will not benefit the future talent, and the future talent will not thrive in that environment. So I think lots of organizations will have to, I think, long term, reconsider how they bring leadership into the current situation. So if we are staying with working more remotely, or with the pressure that's on organizations, I think a lot of leaders now are in a reactive mode, and perhaps they're a little bit under. I think organizations will need to find a way, how do we bring leadership into the given circumstances we're in, so that individuals still can thrive and be seen. And then just a reflection I got as I listened in on performance, and now we're speaking a lot about performance here as individual performance. And I think during these times where there's such a pressure on everyone, I think I would advise everyone also to see what is it that they can bring to the team. How can they support the team? What difference can they make for the colleagues, for the peers? And I would be cautious if to press too much. Is always part of the performance and being a high performance, but just have an eye out for that. You can bring yourself, it's very special at these times, as someone who's supporting the team, and have that awareness as well. And I think that will also benefit how you're seen as a talent. And there's a direct link there from me, at least, in speaking about a high performer, especially during these times.
In a sense, what I'm hearing from you saying, and I'm hearing from all of you, is, spare your boss a thought. He's struggling as well, or she is struggling as well. It's not just those of us who are, at the beginnings of our career, those of us towards the end of our career. You're trying to struggle with the responsibilities we have and how do we relate to people, given that maybe we're less familiar with the tools. I know plenty of people, even in my generation, who can't really use the Zoom and these other structures to communicate with people. And Cynthia, I mean, we've got 3 more questions here, which I think let's try and see if we can do some justice to these. How can we maintain relationships at this time, particularly for junior staff who may not have the established network compared to senior staff? It's just not the same on Zoom or Teams, and I have to say I agree with that. How do you view this?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it is really difficult. And I think, especially, we've hired people that have come into the organization during this period, and we haven't actually even met some of our colleagues face to face because we've all been working remotely. So that's really difficult when, you have, I suppose, more established members of the team who've got that relationship with everybody. They know everyone. They've been out. They've got this kind of commonality and familiarity with each other. It's really difficult to then kind of come in and navigate that. But I think as organizations, you have to try and remember that, everyone will be reacting very differently in this current period and dealing with this in very different kind of ways. So I think a lot of care and attention in terms of when you're speaking to individuals, either on a one-to-one kind of basis, you're just checking in from a human aspect to make sure everyone's actually okay. And I think it's trying to come up with ways that you can bring people collectively. So whether that's team games or whether that's, giving people responsibilities individually to bring the organization together. So make sure somebody's maybe responsible for team games, or somebody's responsible for team quiz once a month or something like that. And I think it's giving people responsibilities to actually then be seeking out their colleagues and building those relationships to bring everyone together is another way of keeping those relationships going. But it's a really difficult time, because I think as you were saying, Tim, even the managers themselves are also struggling to navigate this new world. So we're all trying to learn and try and navigate the best that we can in this new world that we find ourselves. But the one thing I'll probably say is, this won't be forever. I think as long as we can kind of make sure we maintain and look after each other, I think that well-being part is so important. Keep an eye on each other, check in on each other regularly, even if it's just, I just wanted to have 15 minutes just to chat and see how your day is going. That in itself, somebody might not have spoken to anybody all day, or they might live by themselves and not have that direct interaction unless somebody from work calls them, is really, really important. So I think that's something that I would say as organizations we should be doing. In terms of building networks, events like these are good as a good way of kind of distracting yourself, but also finding out more. There's loads of things happening on Eventbrite. Try and register with that. On LinkedIn, try and sign up to some live events or live debates that are taking part, just to widen your reach of people that so you're not always reliant on your own kind of small network. Continue to build your own network while outside of your own work environment, and just learn from others. I think the beauty of the opportunity that we've been given is we've got accountability to drive some of our own learning behaviors ourselves. So, you know, you can sign up to a podcast, or you can sign up to a live event that's happening, you know, and just learn and build your network. And most of these opportunities allow you to access and see other people that you might not see on your day-to-day kind of work environment. So it's a good opportunity to just find out who other people are outside of your own sector and outside your own world as well.
Yeah, I've got another question for you in a minute, Cynthia, but I'll come back to you because it is actually about, we're not a very ethnically diverse industry. What are we going to do about it? And
oh, great.
maybe this is a good time to actually to think about how we can do something about that. But let me go to Ella. I mean, do you like Zoom, by the way? Do you enjoy these kind of?
I prefer seeing people in person, but I've got to say the amount of time being saved on just travel around London, let alone global travel. I'm the kind of, my job requires me to be in a plane 2 or 3 times a week. So, you know, not having that, and I think, I know I've gone on an international business trip for a single meeting before, and I just don't think we'll do that again. You know, that we would do that over Zoom now. And I think that from a carbon footprint perspective is great, but also, you know, you can be very, very effective and efficient online. And I don't think it's a replacement, but I think you can really make an impression on a Zoom as well. And I think you can always come quite prepared. And if you're able to spice up a Zoom meeting and make it a bit more interesting, everyone's always going to be grateful. So you can always make yourself stand out.
But what is the message that you, with the youth Davos, as you put it earlier, what is the message you might send to people who are in my stage of their career, kind of management? We're the people who are actually sitting here making decisions about people's career. From your perspective, what would you tell us?
I think the future of the workplace is precarious for lots of reasons. We mentioned the fourth industrial revolution earlier. And so the war for talent is going to become more aggressive. You know, having the best employees is going to become more and more important. And to get the best employees from diverse backgrounds, to get great women, you know, to get the very best people, I think workplaces all need to be more flexible in every sense. And more dynamic in responding to their employees' needs, genuinely being interested about what their employees need and then meeting them. I think well-being is increasingly important. We try and do a well-being something at least once a month, give people time out. You know, we'll do something like, okay, everyone's going to start work an hour late on Thursday, spend the first hour of the day doing whatever you need to do for your mental health, and post a picture of it on Slack. So you get most people having a lie-in, making themselves a nice breakfast, on a walk, and things like that, where we're really promoting a culture of well-being, I think makes people glad to work for you. I also think that purpose, you know, driven businesses are going to become increasingly where the best talent will reside. So the more purposeful we can make people's day jobs feel, the better your retention will be.
Let's move on to another question. Thank you, Ella. I mean, other than to keep doing what we used to do and now cannot, what are the new things we need to do as part of this new normal, Jill? What are you telling people we need to be learning to do at all stages of your career?
So I think it depends how good you were at this before lockdown and before COVID. But I think the most important thing we need to be doing now is moving towards our EQ rather than our IQ. And probably the most important skill in the EQ spectrum that I see at the moment is empathy. So I suppose in everything we've talked about, whether you want Zoom meetings, whether we're doing different things for different employees, you can only get that right if you've empathized first with the person that you're trying to do that with. So I think building our EQ skills will protect you for future leadership. I mean, managing a team remotely takes more EQ skills than it did face-to-face, there's no question. So I think to future careers and to people moving into leadership, if you haven't already, really start to think about building your EQ. There's so much on the web now about EQ. But I think the most important part of that is the empathy. And you know, to your point earlier, Tim, about leaders are having a tough time as well. You'll get it right in whatever you're doing at the moment, I believe, where you're interacting with someone else, if you empathize first. So firstly, thinking about who's the person in front of me that I'm having dialogue with, or in Zoom, what's important to them right now, what are their challenges, and what do I need to be mindful of to have the best conversation that we're going to have together. So I think it's really about that empathy and EQ in leaders.
I mean, can I just challenge you slightly on that? It strikes me, in my experience of the industry, that many managers are lacking that element. They are not very good at this. They're not promoted because they're good at EQ.
Yeah.
And I think looking at the questions we have, I can see this shining through. You know, we should be sending a message from this call and others to people in managerial positions.
Yeah.
You think how you're dealing with people.
It's no surprise. I think it was McKinsey did the survey, and I think something of all the leaders they interviewed, 10% have natural EQ. The lucky thing is EQ is a learnable skill. But I think just very briefly, everyone can lead upwards. So you can help your leader build EQ and empathy, even by just starting the conversation to say, what's going on in your mind that I should be aware of? Yep. That's, and it'll be an eye opener for your leader as well, when they go, wow, that's an interesting question. So, you know, don't always say, well, because it's not upwards, I'm not doing it. It's the two-way for me. It's always, as leaders and looking upwards, we can always support upwards.
Good point, Mads. Do you agree? What are you doing to push people in that direction?
No, I think it's actually true that this is a quality we need to see in leadership, and is even more needed now than ever. But it has been a theme for quite some years now. I think we're seeing now the differences between leaders who can bring that and those who can't, in how they support the teams through these times. What I would like to add here, now we speak about it as a quality I bring towards others. I think something that will be super critical for everyone who aspire for leadership in the future is also your self-leadership and your self-awareness building. So especially during times of a lot of change and unpredictability, I think a quality you can build that can help you to progress is the insights into your own thinking, the insights into your own feeling, and to work with yourself much more thoroughly. And actually knowing yourself is the best foundation for being something for others. So if you're fearful yourself, if you're frustrated yourself, if you have anxiety about the situation, it will be hard for you to bring the qualities we're speaking towards others. So I think for all of us, build that capacity of tuning into how am I actually feeling? So it's empathy you build for yourself. What are the thoughts going on in my mind right now? Are they true? Are they supportive? Do they support me? Do they support the situation? So I think we'll see in the not in the long distance future, I think we'll see more and more leaders and organizations building those self-awareness muscles so that we can be something for ourselves in order to be something for others.
I mean, we've got quite a number of questions here, which maybe I can group two of them together. So let's just slightly tweak it. I mean, one of the questions is very straightforward, basic question. Is this a bad time to start a new job? And then there's another one, which quite rightly says, so there are not many opportunities in the current pandemic for young professionals. So any advice on how we can find those limited opportunities? So again, it's a problem for many people just starting out at this point in time, and we may head into a bit of an economic recession. Let's hear something a little more upbeat, because there are a lot of people out there who are very naturally and understandably worried. How about Ella? Do you want to give us a bit of an upbeat message?
Well, I don't think it's a bad time to start a new job. I think if you've got an offer and you're excited by it, you know, I do think it's good to follow your excitement. So hopefully that's a positive message. But I would say it's not a great time to be looking. You know, it's a tough time to be looking. Most of the people I know who are looking for jobs right now are finding it pretty difficult. So if the offer's there and you're very excited by it, you know, you need to weigh that up for yourself. But I wouldn't say that it's, you know, this is going to be quite a long recession. So you know, you can't wait. And life is short. I think you've got to really seize the day, and I wouldn't put it off forever, because you will look back with regrets, I think. But you know, I would say that most of our clients, we work with about 160 big companies, many of whom are financial companies, that there are just so many opportunities for innovation coming out of this. And I do think that all the things that we've been talking about, especially with EQ, will make the workplace a better place to be, with less bullying and less stress and more care and compassion for our colleagues. So I think from that perspective, you know, there's a lot to be really, really optimistic about.
Cynthia, I mean, your perspective, there are always opportunities when things change, and remote working does, for the right kind of temperament, the right kind of personality, does give opportunities. Is that the way you see it at the moment? Is that what you're hearing, or is it really just very tough for people?
I think it's a combination. So there are certain sectors that are really difficult at the moment in terms of opportunities. We hear on a daily basis companies laying people off, because again, certain sectors have been hit harder than others. But that's not to say that everything's come to a standstill. I mean, as somebody that runs a recruitment business, we are very busy. So companies are still actively seeking good talent. I think you need to now look at where else opportunities are, where else you can find opportunities. I think the standard, typical kind of ways of maybe accessing opportunities, you have to widen that. You can't just keep going to the same kind of job boards or, applying to the same kind of, places. You have to literally do a lot more work of widen the reach of where you're looking for opportunities. But the opportunities are there, and there are still sectors that are actively, recruiting. And I think it's also looking at, thinking about where you want your career to go. I think one of the things that Ella mentioned is around, purpose-led organizations, people seeking those out. I think there's a lot more purpose-led organizations because of the current environment that we're in, that are coming up and innovating and creating different kind of products where it is really about social change. So I think it's also looking at where do you want your career to go. I think sometimes you almost have to diversify in terms of your skill set. I think if you're so narrow focused to say, I only want a job that's in this company doing this particular role, you will struggle. Now, this is something I've said to a lot of candidates, that you might also have to think with your skill set, where else could you be looking? Where else could your skills be utilized, that you can, start looking at other opportunities? Because unfortunately, as Ella said, we're in it for maybe the long haul before we see a full recovery. So it's looking to see, well, with the skills that I have, what other industries could I be looking at where my skills would also be useful? But also you still need to do something that you're passionate about, something that you're good at. So you look at where else you can transfer those skills to. There will be sectors where those skills are also needed and are also relevant. So, but the more you diversify, sectors and where to look at opportunities, the more you'll find more opportunities as well.
I mean, I think you actually put your finger on a vital point, is you need to look in the mirror and figure out what you're good at doing, what you enjoy doing. And sometimes there's an overlap between what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. Self-recognition is the key to finding the way forward. I can only speak for my career. I've had to re-engineer myself on numerous occasions, and I've had to take myself in unexpected, uncomfortable, and different directions in order to keep moving forwards. And sometimes it appears you're moving backwards or sideways. I think one of the questions we had in our pre-discussion was, how do you define success in a career? Given that in my industry, at least, there are not many people who can be chairman. There are fewer and fewer senior positions. So where do you aspire to? Mads, what's your thinking on this? What is success? Where should we be trying to aim?
How many different versions there are of success. So it's not for me to sit here and define saying this is how success looks like. I think what I'm saying here is, I think it's important that all of us take a step back and look at what brings joy, what brings purpose for me. And when we are in corporate life, it's very easy to get caught into success has to look like the more stripes I get on my shoulder, the higher I climb the ranks, the better. And by all means, if that's what gives you joy and purpose, go for it. But I think it's important that all of us take that step back. And sometimes we need some failures, sometimes we need challenges, sometimes we need a bit of pressure on for us to realize what is actually the purpose I hold, what is important for me. But I think no one should be able to answer that question except yourself.
I think one of the really important things to remember is in any area of our life where we have sort of checkbox items, and I'm sure that everyone here is clearly cares about their career, and I'm sure everyone's very ambitious, is that we have things that we go, okay, right, I want to do this. and I'm going to focus all my energy on that. And I was listening to a podcast earlier on in lockdown with a film director who said his biggest ambition in life was to win best film at Sundance. He never thought he'd do it, but it was his moonshot, big ambition. And he said the day he achieved it was the best day of his life, and the day afterwards was the worst day in his life, because all the other things that were going wrong in his life weren't then solved because he'd achieved this one goal. And I published a book last year, and I had a couple of friends publish books this year, and I've got to say everyone had like publication deflation, of that sense of, oh, I kind of thought it would be different when I was an author, and it's not. So I think just, it's important to set goals that are that matter to you, but also be kind to yourself and know that goals are just a sort of a way of getting through things, and you shouldn't link too much happiness to career or relationship or any goals really, because there'll be the day you achieve it, and then there'll be the day after.
Jill.
Yeah, I think a bit to what Ella said. So I think part of the important part of success is actually recognizing when you've achieved part of those milestones. So interestingly, when I've worked with people and they've made it to MD or whatever, and I'll say, and what did you do? How did you recognize it? And they'll say, oh, it was a normal day or whatever. So I think part of it is, like Ella said, it's, the life still carries on the same the day afterwards. So do make sure you recognize the milestones. But I think it's also about being purposeful to say, well, what would success mean for me? To Mad's point, it's very individual, and people will think about it in different ways. To anyone who's listening and hasn't yet started to think about what does success look like for me, I would always say to some of my clients, go 10 years out. So if you're sitting, let's say 10 years from now, or your nearest 10th milestone birthday, put yourself somewhere completely different, whether you're on a beach or an island or wherever, but somewhere completely out of the norm, and write the letter back to yourself. So write the letter that says, I'm sitting here looking back 10 years on at what I achieved. That will tap into your unconscious, and it will start to bring out some of the things that maybe you don't realize are important. So
maybe I could just throw in there that, I look at a long career I've had, and I have to say it didn't follow the path I set, and it didn't do what I thought it was going to do, but it was a lot of fun nevertheless. And I look at myself today, and I work for a Chinese bank, and I'm loving it. But if you had asked me only a few years ago, would you be working for a Chinese bank? I'm not sure that would have been my answer. And in fact, I think in one sense, I always share this with people when I get the opportunity. You set yourself goals, but they have to be goals that you move around. You have to be flexible. You need to understand that at different phases of your life, you need to be achieving different things. And it's not necessarily what you set out on day one. And I think this is something that people need to bear in mind.
You make an important point, Tim, because it's also important to recognize that people are different. So, to the two extremes, I'll have clients who are more on the what I call not quite winging their career, but the opportunities come along, it's the right one for them, they take it, it wasn't planned. But there are those who really like the control and the plan. So you'll fall into one of the two categories. But
in my case, you just fall.
Well, you fell pretty well, Tim.
I mean, I've still got a few more questions here, and I think let's see if we can deal with some of these. I mean, let me come back to a question I asked you earlier, Cynthia, since it's a very relevant question. We're not a very ethnically diverse industry, but is this a good time to us to try and address this? What do you think we should be doing? What do we tell people out there who don't feel that they belong?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think, representation is very important. And I think unless people can see themselves represented in certain sectors and certain organizations, they think it's not for them, and therefore they don't come forward. They don't even bother applying, and one of the things I'm always mindful of is, saying I give myself as an example. When I was starting out in my career, I wanted to be a fashion designer, but I didn't see Black fashion designers at all. And therefore it actually put me off, because I didn't think as a Black female, I could actually have a career as a fashion designer. And therefore I didn't follow that passion, because I just didn't think that was something that somebody from my background did. So that's the importance of representation. Unless people can see themselves represented, and especially all the way through, right through to the hierarchies in senior positions, they feel it's unattainable. So for me, when organizations say, well, we just can't find the talent, I get really frustrated, because it's not that the talent isn't there. There isn't equal access to those opportunities. So as a sector, if you're genuinely wanting to change, you have to look at the way that you bring people on. You have to look at what you deem good looks like, because that, again, is a barrier in itself. If you keep recruiting from the same pool of candidates that look the same kind of way, that have had the same kind of background, the same kind of upbringing, of course it's never going to be, you're never going to change anything. So you have to almost take a long, hard look at yourselves. And I think what for me has been pivotal moment in the last few months was after the unfortunate death of George Floyd. It made a lot of people take a hard look at themselves, and especially organizations, in terms of what they look like. And I think that was a wake-up call to say, are we doing enough to bring talent into our organization that looks different? And if we're not, what are we actually going to do about it? And I think those that were genuine about trying to move that dial forward and really try and find a way to bring people that look differently into the sector have been going about it and looking at the processes. So it's not just been about a silver bullet of let's just hire people that look differently. It's literally peeling back all the layers of how do we actually attract talent? What do we actually ask for when we're looking for people to come to work for us? How inclusive is our recruitment process? Does it exclude people out that process? And also the people that are hiring, are they hiring in their own images? And therefore people that look differently are not coming through because there's bias in that process. So if you're genuine about wanting to create an inclusive organization where everyone that is reflected, and we reflect society in its entirety, you almost have to take a step back and look at yourselves very differently. You have to look at yourselves very objectively, but hold yourselves accountable for driving some of that change as well. And for me, the talent is there. You just need to look at your processes and remove the barriers that exist. And we know that the barriers do exist. It's just whether people want to acknowledge that or not.
You say that the talent is there, and I agree, because in fact, I've often found that people, first impressions are usually misleading. And I usually find that when I start working with people, I discover all sorts of interesting things about them that they don't necessarily see in themselves. And maybe Mads is giving you a chance to come in here. Mentoring people is all about seeing someone, taking someone and helping direct them in the right direction through a process of self-discovery. Isn't that right? Isn't that what we should all be trying to do with people, below us and around the organization and on the outside?
I think that's part of it as a mentor, that you can help people to get that self-awareness through you. In a way, it's funny, right? Because you use your own experiences to mirror and help people to discover more about themselves. But I think that's crucial in also getting to a more diversified organization, where also people feel comfortable about bringing themselves, and where they feel they know what they can bring into it. And then, of course, to create that inclusive culture where it's welcomed. And I think it, just building on what Cynthia was saying, I was reflecting on, I think there's a movement. It's a slow movement, but I think we are moving towards it. I think it's being accelerated these days with the crisis that we're experiencing, because the world is the complexities that we have, the challenges that we have, the new technologies that's coming, the changing customer landscape is calling for such a different approach for organizations. They need all the diverse creativity and diversity of thought that they can get. And I think organizations are realizing it. And then what they're realizing is that if we don't have an inclusive organization, it doesn't matter to bring in diverse people, because then we'll block it. I think in mentoring, we can help to unlock that, both in individuals and in organizations. But it's also a responsibility for top leadership to look at how do we create a culture in our organization that cater for this.
I mean, you mentioned technology. We've got two questions here on what to do with technology. Is digitization an opportunity or an existential threat to our careers? One question. The second question is, and it's slightly different, but I mean, should we build our social media profile? How do we do it to increase visibility and network? Of course, everyone else is doing it, so how do you shine? What do you think it's a threat, and how do we use it?
Well, it's a threat if we don't adapt. So there's change, right? And there's always been change. I remember when, I remember back to the 80s with some of the change going on there, and there was this concern about technology would remove jobs and no one would have jobs in the future. There's still plenty of jobs. I think the key here is what is required of us as individuals is to understand what is the impact of what I do. And how do I adapt and how do I grow? How do I develop my competence profile? If we insist on not changing, it will become a threat. But if we grow with technology and see how we can embrace it, I think it will create much more opportunities. New interesting roles that none of us even can think of today will emerge. So I think there's a mindset that has to be installed in all of us in engaging with it, even if it leads, as we've talked about, careers ending in a different direction than we thought it would. I think there's something here that's very important. If we get stuck and it has to look like this, technology and change becomes a threat. Instead, we need to be open-minded and see there are different paths I can take. And then I can use technology and I can grow with it and I can learn.
I completely agree on the adaptability point. I also think that the increased challenges around learning and just continuing to be learning and informing yourself and being really proactive on the education piece. I think curiosity has been a theme that's really come through, but I think if you are always staying on top of technological development so that when there are discussions around it in the workplace, you're on the informed side and you're able to really offer quite innovative perspectives, that will be very helpful to you. I think on the social media branding side, I'm sure Jill and Cynthia have got stronger opinions on this than me. I mean, I think it can make a difference, but I would say it's very industry specific and role specific. If you were hiring for a role, if you thought the social media would make a difference, then it's probably going to make a difference to the person who's actually hiring, in which case you need to concentrate more on it. But I'm sure there's plenty of jobs in finance where personal branding doesn't matter at all, and it's just much more about performance. I think with personal branding, and we all struggle with this, I certainly do, it's work, it takes time, and it can make you feel more self-conscious over time because you're putting yourself out there, and everyone feels the pressure to look and speak and be a certain way. So I would watch the impacts of mental health of focusing a lot on personal branding, because I know there's some people, and they're not influencers, they've only got a couple of hundred Instagram followers, but it really does give them quite a lot of anxiety, and life's stressful enough. So just don't push yourself too hard on things. Ultimately, a good updated LinkedIn is probably more than adequate for most jobs at the moment. But of course, if you're starting your own business, you're trying to get investment, that there may be other elements to it. But I think, like all things, it takes a balance.
Jill, do you agree with that? By the way, am I going to be turned into a robot this time next year? That's the other question I'm worried about. Maybe I am one already and no one realized.
I think just on Ella's piece around the social media and the networking, I think it comes back to really protect your brand. So, and I don't mean that necessarily just from aesthetic brand. Your brand is how you behave. So as a leader, how you behave every day builds your brand. And I say to leaders I work with, really think purposefully about how you want people to portray your brand. So if a year from now you want someone to describe your brand, what are the 5 words you want them to be saying? Well, then make sure you're behaving in that way. So put your shop window out there behind your brand and make sure it's authentic. And you'll know it's authentic if you can do it every day without really considering it too much. But I think the bit I would say about LinkedIn and about media, and particularly in the light of, the current impact on careers, is make sure that your LinkedIn or wherever you're putting what I call your shop window, make sure you've put the best version of you. So sometimes I'll read CVs and people's bios, and it's what I call a role profile blog. It's not you. So people want to recruit people. They want to understand what makes them tick. They want to understand what they're really about. And normally the best way to hear that is through stories. So the more you can animate who you are as the person and what your leadership style is, even if it's a paragraph at the beginning, I think that's much more impactful than telling me what roles you've done. That's great. That's a career bio. It doesn't tell me the person I'm recruiting. So that would be
that's a good point. I mean, when I look at plenty of CVs, and I like to get an impression about the individual, about the person. I love to see the interest section. That, to my mind, is what they do away from work tells me something about the person. It's part of the story. And again, I think people, even at the beginning of their career, should realize they have a huge amount to tell, not just to sell.
And for me, it's about, in that first paragraph, talk about your strengths. So what are your strengths as a leader? That's not just your role profile.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I was just going to add a little bit to that as well, and just being also cautious around what you're putting out on social media. So if you're going to, what you might think today might come back and haunt you in 10 years time. We've seen loads of people having to step down from amazing careers because of a tweet that they sent out 10 years ago, because that was their thought process then. So just always be mindful that, unfortunately, whatever you do on social media, you leave a digital footprint, and somewhere, somehow, somebody will unearth what conversations that you've had. So just be mindful about what you're putting on social media, because again, we've had times as recruiters, I know the times when people will look at people's social media, whether it's their Facebook, their Instagram, whatever, to find out what you're all about. So just be cautious that if you are in the job market, that you will leave a digital footprint. Make sure it's a good one and not one that will actually impact on you getting a job or not.
Do you recommend people to use LinkedIn a lot as a job tool?
Yeah. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. If you know how to use LinkedIn, for me, it's one of the go-to places as recruiters. I don't know any recruiter that doesn't use LinkedIn. So if you're going to be putting your profile on LinkedIn, make sure it's up to date. Make sure it sells you in the best light, but also make sure that your LinkedIn profile and your CV correlate, because what you tend to find is people will have something on their CV, and on their LinkedIn is completely different version. So you want to make sure that there's consistency across what you're saying, because a lot of times now you can actually, the way that technology is moving is you don't even have to upload a CV, you just upload your LinkedIn profile. So most companies are now leaning on LinkedIn as a way to engage with talent versus the traditional CV and cover letters. So just make sure that your profile is always up to date, because trust me, recruiters will use LinkedIn as a way of looking at you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point made about LinkedIn. It's the only tool I use on a regular basis, but I'm always looking at people on LinkedIn and occasionally put stuff out there. I think it's a way of again, to the point that's being made, create a brand for yourself. But it's one that's got to be future-proof. You don't want to be putting something out which then blows you up later on because you've said something cretinous stupid when you're younger.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these things will come back and bite you at some point. Amazing what due diligence employers now undertake. They check and scrub everything they need to know. And we've had examples of senior leaders who've lost their jobs for things they'd said 10 or 15 years ago. So I think we should all be, it's a very well made point, Cynthia. There is someone saying, asking the question, is it important to play politics in a highly competitive industry like finance? Sometimes delivering and performing are not enough. Should we all be playing politics, Jill? I mean, we're all junior politicians.
This is my personal opinion, but I'm not a fan of
politics. I hear you, Jill. Try again. Yeah, that's it.
So it's my personal opinion, but I'm not a fan of politics. And I worked in the finance industry for 18 years, so I'm fully aware of how they can play out. I think there is always a better outcome if you kind of, I suppose, coach through the conversation. But I would always be saying, okay, what's the outcome we're trying to get here, and move towards that outcome. Whether that's through being curious, whether that's through being assertive, whether that's through, even helping understand what the reason behind the politics is. But I think it does. I've never seen it give a long-lasting outcome. when people have played to politics. And I do think there is a much better outcome when we understand what the politics are and we work through them rather than become a part of them.
Anyone want to comment on that? If I could just, maybe I'll just quickly say that having been in the industry all my life, I've seen a huge amount of politics. I don't like it either. I always seem to be on the receiving end of it. But it's a fact of life in our industry. And one thing I recommend everybody in the industry, financial services sector, in its wider sense, is you do need to have a fairly thick skin, because you need to be able to take some knocks as we go along. This is not the easiest industry to work in. Current circumstances make it even tougher. But I have to say to everyone, we need to believe in ourselves, stay positive, but be able to be resilient. And I think resilience is something that we all need, and we need to grow that within ourselves. Anyone, Ella, Cynthia, would you like to make a comment?
I think this is where your own personal moral compass is really important. And I think what I would say is don't get swept along with something that you don't agree with morally when it comes to playing politics. Having said that, I would also say ethics is number one, and the second one is just not to be naive. I've seen a lot of people end up not in a career place that they want to be because of a bit of naivety. So I think you don't have to play politics to be aware of them and to understand the dynamics. And sometimes it's about avoiding it as much as it is about engaging. But I think, ultimately, leaders that people really respect have got great moral compasses. They're ethical, they're compassionate. And I think you always want to be that person rather than, the kind of person that says something like, oh, well, yes, they're very good at their job, but they're a bit of a snake. Who wants to be the snake? Nobody does. So, I think your own moral compass is really, really the key in navigating these scenarios.
Well, look, in fact, I was just going to say, one of the questions that's just come up is, if you're in the early stages of your career today, what would you do differently in today's political work climate compared with when you started out?
That's the one I was reading, and I
can see it on your mind. Fashion designer to employment specialist in diversity.
Yeah, I suppose to answer that question, it's a great question. What would I do in this kind of climate? And I think one of the things I would love to kind of do is just, as I said, adaptability and just diversifying your skill set. I think one of the things that I was so adamant about when I was younger is I wanted to be a fashion designer because that's what I thought would make me happy. And I think now that I run a purpose-led organization, I'm more fulfilled than I probably would have ever been about clothes. Not to say that there's anything wrong with shopping or clothes, but I've combined my passion as my occupation. I actually call it my occupation, but to me it never feels like work. So find something that you do that never feels like work, because trust me, there will be difficult days where you have to get yourself up, but if it's something that you love and you just, every being part of you is just excited about doing what you do every single day, it never becomes like work and it never feels like work. So that is one thing I'd probably say to my younger self, is just find something that you're passionate about, something that you care about, and something that it's a life of purpose. I think once you can find that, the rest just follows. It really does.
Maybe I can, we're getting into the last 10 minutes or so. Mads, what would you have done differently? Are you happy with where you are? Are you a content man?
I am actually very, very happy of where I am now. I think it took some time for me to land in what is the right thing for me. I think what I would have done differently, and perhaps even with the actually also relating to the current situation, is I would have been more consistent, say no to poor leadership. I think I accepted poor leadership too long in my career. And I could imagine that in times now, this is me assuming, but I'm imagining that we could find ourselves in a situation now where we compromise things because we want to hold on to jobs, career stability. And I'm not to say you shouldn't do, but if I were in the early phases of my career now, given the circumstances going on now, I would not stick up with poor leadership. Life is simply too short to be working for a poor manager.
Jill?
So I think for me, and it's probably through my coaching career more than, you know, what's going on. But I think for me, it's about being purposeful every day. So I ask myself two questions, and this is what I wish I'd done in my earlier career, is each day ask yourself, what is it I really need to achieve today? So what's the what do I need to achieve, and how am I going to do it? And keep doing that every day. So make sure that every day, whether it's in your work, whether it's in your home life, and I think particularly at the moment, because the two are merged much more, is be really purposeful. And then, you know, it also gives you a point at the end of the day to recognize, okay, I did it, or something's moved again. But be more purposeful would be my learning, and really think about what you need to achieve.
Anna, and in fact, I should say that in the last 10 minutes we've got a few questions. Obviously, people are worried. There are people out there in the early parts of their career very concerned about where they're going and making the right choices. And I think we've seen running through this whole conversation is the need to stay fit and healthy in mind and in body as well. Ella.
I think I can empathise with people who are worried. Like, it is a difficult time. I think don't feel that every decision there's a right and wrong decision. You know, that there isn't necessarily a left door and a right door, and one's going to lead to a fantastically successful career. You know, it's not an escalator. It's not a direct journey, and sometimes you do have to go through roles you don't like as much, or, you know, roles that you're not as good at, in order to really, really find where you want to go. So don't be afraid of something not being quite the right fit, especially during a recession. You know, it's important to have a job, and I think you don't feel like if it's not the perfect job that your career is going in the wrong direction. It's just a redirection. Things I do differently, I think I wish I'd taken up a language kind of after university, rather than just being like, oh, I'm 21, I couldn't possibly learn a language now, because it goes so quickly. You know, if I'd started a language when I finished university, I'd have been like, oh, I've learned Mandarin for 8 years now, and that will open up jobs for you, and you never know.
In my current job, that would be fantastic, and I'm too old to learn it now.
Well, you know, and it's just one of those things that I think learning languages just opens up opportunities, and you know, even if it's to be a liaison with a country rather than to move to a country, you never know. So I think always think about learning a language. I think I would avoid narcissists like the plague. If someone's narcissistic, either fire them, get rid of them, or move. Like, they are just toxic for your career and toxic for your mental well-being. I would also speak up when stuff's wrong. I think that there were a couple of situations when things weren't going right in my workplace, where I really just sucked it up and thought no one else was thinking the same thing, and it made me really unhappy. And actually, when I raised it, people said, yeah, no, I agree, I know that's not right. And it's amazing how many people will actually be having the same experience as you. And if you can broach it, you can work together to fix it. Whereas when you suffer in silence at work, you know, the problem just continues. So those would probably be the three things that I would want to go back and tell myself.
You know, I recognize that a lot of people out there are going to be nervous. I think we'd all anticipated that. I think the whole purpose of bringing together you four experts is really to give us some sense of purpose. And if I can perhaps just give three bits of advice from where I sit, and I've had to draw deeply upon these throughout my career, which has been fun but bumpy. Be resilient, because I think this is a testing time for all of us. Stay fit, of course. And don't give up. I mean, don't give up is something, I think it's very easy sometimes for us to think it's just too hard. We're being rejected. People don't want us. Sometimes it's not you, it's the circumstances. And the third element is, don't be afraid to change your objective, to change your aim, to modify the game in order to move forward. It's not always easy to give that advice to people, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. I've done it. I'm sure all of our speakers today have done it at various points, is to tweak your objective, to move around the obstacle, which is very difficult to move. And I think right now, creativity and careful reflection is vital. And I would urge everyone, take a look at the websites of the four speakers we had today. Take a look at the ICMA's mentoring website, because I think it's really important that you draw upon the resources which are available, the industry makes available, to try and give people some guidance at this kind of challenging time. But remember this, I think we've all said it in different ways, this will pass. We just have to hold the line until it passes, and we will be out the other side. And this is an industry that needs people. It is a people industry. We're not going to be all digitized tomorrow. This is where people-to-people contact are fundamental and key to what we do. And that's something I am passionate about and fundamentally believe. So think about those thoughts. So that's all we've got time for today. And thank you very much to our 4 speakers, to Cynthia, Mads, Ella, and Jill, for spending the time with us. We very much enjoyed listening to all of your thoughts. A huge thank you, of course, again to the Future Leaders Group and all of you delegates who've joined us for this event. If you have further questions or you want to get involved, I would refer you to the ICMA website, and please look for ways that you can sign up or sign up to the mentoring website, which of course is an important part of what we do as an association. So thank you all once again for joining us, and we look forward to our next event, which hopefully will be in a more physical format with the drinks brought back again. Thank you very much indeed.